have geospatial data identified when it comes to NSDI. So we need to categorize what kind of data that we would consider as geospatial data, right? So by definition, it's any object on the earth which is spatially referenced, can be geospatial data. It can be point of interest, linear features like roads, railroads, rivers, things, or a hypothetical or physical boundaries that you have in place. Basically, a reference to the earth is required. So, spatial data infrastructure, we handle the geospatial data. Then, whatever the data we have, we need to have the spatial reference. So, basically, we will not only having the spatial data. So, we have lots of attribute data. But this attribute data should be linked with the spatial component, otherwise it cannot exist as a attributes of spatial data. So data that identifies the geographic location of features and boundaries on Earth, such as natural or constructed features, oceans, and whatever more. And spatial data is generally stored as coordinates or in terms of topology. You know what topology is? The spatial relationships. So we have spatial data as well as spatial relationships are stored. And this data can be produced in the form of a map. And generally we use GIS to assess, manipulate, or analyze the spatial data. If you look at the life cycle of the geospatial data, we have the data capture. We can have the spaceborne data. We can have the airborne data. We can have the field-based data collections. And then we process this data. And after we process this data, we can put it to a place where other people can have a look at it, can work on it, can download it. So it's an information cloud. We put the data for the purpose of sharing it. And then we produce various products, value-added products from the original data and deliver this data for whoever needs this information. So this geospatial life cycle or geospatial value chain, it is important in NSDI to promote all aspects of the life cycle, all aspects of the value addition process, rather than limiting it to one or two. With the international experience that we have, we find that most of the time, what is made available is the first part, capturing data and making this data available for people. So what happens is, large amount of raw data, unprocessed data are available through NSDI's data structures, mechanisms. But other components of this life cycle are not really complete. For example, this value addition doesn't take place generally. You have raw data made available, but people do not add value to this data due to various issues, various restrictions, limitations in the NSDI. So the raw data or unprocessed data will remain as unprocessed data, and general users find it extremely difficult to process this data and get into the output. Therefore, The objectives of NSDI, making geospatial data available at the fingertips of users, will not happen because we have large wealth of data that we have captured as raw data from various sensor platforms, various camera platforms, and various field platforms. We collect data. We get spaceborne data, we get airborne data, we get uh, local sensor data, local camera data or visualized data, also recorded data. And also we collect data, various data from various reconnaissance surveys. And these data are not processed. These data are not value-added products. It's like this. In the apparel industry, you can make large amount of apparel material available. But making that effort, making large amount of material available for apparel industry, would that develop the industry to a higher level? No. You need to have this apparel processing or working factories where these apparel materials are converted to useful garments, and then you need to have various new models, value additions to these garments, and then produce various kind of newer products, and then these can be tailor-made to different people and then provide to the people. So unless you continue this value addition process, making the material available for the garment industry will not develop the industry. So likewise, making large volume of spatial data will not develop the industry. You need to have the entire life cycle improved or taken care of if you want to develop the industry. So that's very important when it comes to the spatial data industry or the data industry supported by the spatial data infrastructure. So if you look at the use of geospatial data, this is a borrowed slide. We use data for planning, monitoring, decision-making operations, and various sectors like crime management, utility management, land use planning and management, environmental management, disaster management, transportation management, urban planning and management. So we have various areas where this geospatial data are said to be very, very critical. So these areas, we need to look at these areas because whatever the value addition that we do with the data should facilitate the smooth transition or smooth transfer of data to these various sectors for their information needs. So if you look at the Sri Lankan structure for the geospatial data or geospatial data providers, the basic maps or whatever framework data are available with the survey department. Now the survey department has improved quite a lot. Earlier, it was difficult to even purchase a printed map from the survey department. And now they are willing to provide even the digital layers of the data. With the right permission, you can purchase the digital layers of this framework data from the survey department. That is a vast improvement from the status where we had in the country some time back. I can remember by 1999, the survey department was very restrictive. They didn't even want to discuss what is available, what kind of flight planning missions they have planned, what are the areas they want to cover, and all a very corrected information. If you come to the urban plans and maps in Sri Lanka, it is UDA, Urban Development Authority, which is responsible. Land use maps, land use planning department or division, and vulnerability or risk analysis data, disaster management center, and climate or rainfall data from meteorological department, Department of Meteorology, flood data, irrigation department, tsunami data, this special center, and landslide maps. Whenever there's a landslide, NBRO is the National Building Research Organization. Environmental data maps from CEA, census data from Census and Statistics. So these are some of the institutions. So what are the problems? The data sets are not shared efficiently. We don't have a mechanism to share the data efficiently, which prevents other people using this data. That's the reality. So without the proper infrastructure built in to share data, we don't have a good data sharing mechanism. Data are not shared efficiently. Therefore, several problems arise. And when you don't have an efficient data sharing mechanism, everybody start producing data for the same theme. You will see different sets of data with different accuracy levels, different quality levels, different levels. So we have an issue, duplication of data, which is a serious issue. And the duplication of data needs to be avoided through the NSDI or Sri Lanka SDI initiative. And we will find that different standards of the same data set, different versions of the same data sets are available. Multiple data sets with different standards, different versions of the same data, which have not been chronologically improved. Like if you have one source of information, say for example, land use, every year land use changes. So you produce a new map, but it's a chronologically recorded so that we know when it was started, how it was developed, now what kind of status we have for the data. And then we have different data qualities. When it comes to quality, we have different issues, accuracy levels, data format protocols, like some data to 1 decimal point, some data to 2 decimal points, some data for 4 decimal points, some data without any decimal points. So likewise, we have issues with the standards, how you maintain the data quality levels of data standards. And there are still some barriers, red tapes for sharing data. So that when you ask a question, they will say you need various kinds of bureaucratic permissions to release the data. So it's not one-step process. And practically, this is the situation in most of the institutions. If you want to get some work done, there's no standard procedure, there's no standard time. There are no standard mechanisms to provide or process the requirement. So that's another issue. Bureaucratic stumbling blocks need to be removed. Red tapes need to be removed. So all these things reduce the efficiency of national and local planning and development. So efforts for local planning are affected. Local planning and development, and also national level planning and development work is very seriously affected because of these restrictions. And that can lead to increased budget and increased complexities because we don't see the problem properly. So these are some of the issues. And if you look at some of the very clear examples of this duplication of data collection. The first case I want to present is tsunami inundation mapping. So immediately after 2004 tsunami, four organizations came forward to do the mapping of the tsunami inundated area. Geological Survey and Mines Bureau, Coast Conservation Department, International, at that time, International Water Management Institute, and Urban Development Authority. All four institutions went ahead, got various spatial data, and produced inundation maps which are different. Because the differences due to the base data are different. The base data layers that you use are different. Boundaries, there are no standard format for boundaries. So everything is variable. Then you can't produce standard products. When you see that everything is varying, you cannot have standard product. That is the issue. So second, the tsunami, in fact, the post-tsunami operations, in fact, immediately after the tsunami, rescue operations were hampered by not having proper map data, and subsequently the rehabilitation work, compensation payments, resettlement of the people, reconstruction, all these things were affected because we did not have proper data with us to make this. And the second issue is there are four versions of granular division maps available in Sri Lanka. Survey Department has one version, UDA has another version, Census and Statistics has another version, UNOCHA has another version. So there should be only one source for GN divisions in Sri Lanka. You cannot be having different GN division boundaries from different sources. Since we don't have a standardized product, we cannot blame people for developing their own map infrastructure. But unfortunately, that cannot be allowed with a proper NSDI. We should be able to now come up with proper data structures. So then we know exactly what GN divisions are, what are the boundaries, what are the sizes, and it's a standard product. And another case, the same satellite image, especially during tsunami, again, related to case one, acquired by different organizations. The government organizations are acquiring the same set of data by paying multiple times. I'm not saying that we should purchase this data, but we should not purchase the same set of data for three different or four different institutions. It's wasting public money. So this shows that we need to have a coordinated approach for geospatial data sharing, which can only be achieved through the NSDIO spatial data infrastructure. So in order to share our data, at present, we don't have agreement or policies for collaboration and sharing. We don't have a proper agreement in place or policies implemented which facilitate the collaboration and data sharing. We don't have a common information infrastructure, not only for spatial data. We don't have a proper information infrastructure. Recently, we had a high-powered committee for telecommunication infrastructure. From ICTA, all major telecom companies, and government ministry, and I was also involved in that as a member of the committee. So we don't have this information and communication infrastructure. We don't have a common technology. Technologies are scattered. We don't have a common technology. Now, if you look at the communication infrastructure, globally we have the two types of platforms. Globally, it is accepted, although there are other minor platforms. When it comes to the communication, we have Android and Apple. So everything is built on those platforms. Spatial data, we don't have such technology platforms. We don't have standards. But telecommunication industry, we have standards. We phase out 2G, 3G. Now we are going to 5G, 6G, and 7G. So technological advancement should push the standards forward. That will help to have a higher level of standards and also protocols. What is recorded, what is monitored, what is transmitted need to have standard protocols. What are the barriers to share data? The barriers related to national security. We have different formats. These formats are not talking to each other. They can't understand each other. They are vastly different technological platforms used by these formats. So we have issues. Compatibility issues are also there. Especially boundaries, data sets we don't match properly. When you take one data set from one source and another data set from another source, you can't put them together. So organizational needs that require sale of data. Some of the organizations require to raise money which they incurred in collecting the data. So there's no way they can release the data without making some earning. And most of the time, most of these problems are due to lack of policy guidance, policy directives. Today, if you look at most of the problems, not only NSDI, most of the problems that we have are due to lack of policy directives. For example, we had the coconut crisis. If we had a proper policy directives, we could have identified this problem well before the market tells us that there is no coconut available. So policy should be developed in such a way so that we can monitor and make a good prediction of the processes for the future. Same with other problems. So it is not one issue. Lack of policy support is a key issue for everything. We could have stopped exporting coconut if we had information about a crisis in Sri Lanka. We allow export of coconut and then we import coconut. Who is making money? The people, those who handle freight, transportation. We export and then we import because we don't have a policy. It is the responsibility of the government to get involved immediately and produce the policy directives before a problem becomes a crisis. Our practice is we wait until the problem becomes a crisis and then try to do some patchwork. Because to avoid problems, to avoid crisis, we need to have the policy directives. The policy governs the situation. To that, we need human resource. We need to have people knowledgeable who can understand the market dynamics, who can understand the industry dynamics. So it is important that we develop our human resource. And also we need to be familiar with the development of allied technologies, computers and software. We need to be aware of the global developments. What we can take or how we can enrich our resources from this global development. We acquire computers, but we don't know how to use it. I am in the board of directors of one of the key defense establishment. And they have ordered a computer, high-powered computer, which cost about 1.5 million rupees. Let me ask the question, why do you need that kind of machine? No answer. So technology is acquired, the new technological products are acquired, but without really understanding the need of it. That's another issue. Standards and systems. We don't have standards, we don't have systems in place. Everything is basically ad hoc. And also we, as a society, we should learn to share. We should learn the values related to sharing. Everybody benefits, nobody loses when you share. When you don't share, everybody loses, including you. So what happens is the entire spatial data community suffers from these problems. Therefore, we need to have these barriers identified and so this is an example of spatial data sharing. If you look at the bottom left, you can see various institutions came forward to provide the data. So various agencies contributed for the development of this map, which should benefit every institution to perform their mandated tasks. The combined data map, it will help to see flood management. It will assist us to provide the relief in case of disasters, cyclones or floods. It will provide the opportunity for expansion of settlements. It will also help to prevent the expansion of settlement towards the risky, potentially hazardous areas. So likewise, there are lots of opportunities that arise by combining the data. So, which this NSDI, which will coordinate spatial data collection, processing, storage, sharing, and dissemination, and the quality and standards of spatial data. So, NSDI is not a mechanism of changing the organizational authorities. Who has the authority, who has the mandate, that will not change. Will not change the mandates, will not change the ownerships, will not change the authorities, will not change the copyrights, but allows us to work together to benefit everybody. So, Sri Lanka spatial data infrastructure is proposed to bring in all those to build one map policy for Sri Lanka. This one map policy has different meanings. For each parameter variable, you have one standard maps. If it is a GN division, it's one map with boundaries. Can't have several maps. If it is a soils map, it's one map. If it is a population map, it's one map. You can have the population dynamics, but it's one. Likewise. So SDI, Sri Lanka Spatial Data Infrastructure, is viewed as a technology, policy, standards, human resources, and related activities necessary to collaborate, acquire, process, distribute, use, maintain, and preserve spatial data throughout all levels of government, private, and the citizens for efficient service delivery. One of the key barriers for the service management is we don't have the geocoded addresses. We can't reach people. We can't reach households because we don't have properly geocoded locations. If you go to developed country, you don't need any additional tools to identify locations. All the houses are numbered from 1 to whatever the n number on the left-hand side in increasing order. Right-hand side, it is the same. So probably right-hand side, you have all the odd numbers. Left-hand side, you have only the even numbers. So it's very easily, you can have the address locator, geocoded address locator built into this situation. But in Sri Lanka, it's very difficult because we have number 2 here, and next one is 55, next one is 170, and then we have number 3. So likewise, we don't have proper location identifiers that will make our service deliveries very, very inefficient. Whether you want to deliver services like telecom, electricity, water, or you want to deliver some of the materials like the food, the pizza delivery, food delivery, all these things, the mail delivery, and also the delivery of other service products, it'll have serious problems when we don't have the geocoded address locators. So this is one way of developing it. And the provincial authorities should ensure that all are geocoded locations so that they can monitor it easily. So Sri Lanka spatial data infrastructure, we have policy component where we have institutional deals, detecting duplication of production, which is geographic information, identifying roles, data production and procession of geographic information, elaborate fundamental data sharing programs. Under legal, we have legal marks, institutional mandates defined, legal and authoritative rights, rules and legislation, and costs and trading platforms. And then standards, where you need to have data exchange standards, data metadata standards. Then when it comes to data, definition of similar, fundamental, and thematic data, certifying and compatibilization. So whether you make into compatible, integration and divulgation. You release the data about the availability under metadata component. Technological platforms, protocols and interfaces for communication and search, server networks and service delivery processes. And if you look at the international initiatives which we discuss individually in this course, USA National SDI Policy, Federal Geographic Data Committee produced that, we can learn from that. Europe Directive 2007-2 EC of the European Parliament and of the Council of 14 March 2007 establishing an infrastructure for spatial information in the European community. We call it as INSPIRE. And then GIS law in Spain, geographic information infrastructures and services in Spain. And Korea, GIS law in Korea, implementation and utilization of NG, National Geographic Information System Act of Korea. Japan, Geospatial Information Authority of Japan. Indonesia, Geospatial Act. Canada, Canadian Geospatial Data Infrastructure Initiative. Canadian Council of Geomatics is responsible. Singapore, we have integrated government component. So likewise, we have a number of international initiatives which are responsible for producing proper SDI products. And access and data sharing, interoperability issues, and local management, portability, and then we have build once and use many times, either reference data or thematic data. Reference data like what we call as a framework data, settlement, transportation, hydrography, spelling is wrong, HY, boundaries, geodetic control, altimetry, elevation imaging, and thematic data. We have security, demography, flooding, logistics, economy, pedology, natural resources, environment, and all that. Benefits of SLSDI: cost saving, data sharing through collaboration, better management of natural and land resources, improved public access to data and information, and improved public image for all participants, maximizing resources efficiency and transparency. So basic pillars of SLSDI, we need to have a policy, you need to have technology, you need to have data, you need to have human resources, you need to have standards, you need to have the legal, strong legal support. All these things will come and produce a strong SLSDI. So approach, we need to work through a governance framework consisting of project steering committees, subcommittees for various thematic areas to cover all functional areas, so that all sections that are required to be addressed can be identified. Cabinet of Ministers approved setting up the committee and carrying out to study to map out the way forward. Use funds available under BIM survey to do this. And so this should have taken 3 to 4 months, but it's taken years. It's not happening. So this is a slide I borrowed. Step towards a national SDI. So first of all, understanding of the value of data and sharing of data. Then development of a prototype system to share data using limited number of agencies and then expand it a number of brokering mechanisms to read different types of data, develop and the policies and methods to share data. So this is the kind of way forward. For Sri Lanka, the proposed approach is the use of ICT experience, e-governance systems, identify available data and missing data. We need to develop partnerships, agency partnerships towards data generation and sharing, technical assistance and international experience. So spatial data infrastructure, one of the key components is data updating. You need to update. Whenever there's a change, you need to update your data. So there should be a mechanism for that. Construct a prototype model based on environment and disaster areas, test and learn, develop policy framework and expand the effort to NSDI. So these are some of the approaches that we can take. So big project, setting up a LSSDI. So we work on subcommittees and then combine this is the option to produce the Sri Lanka SDI. So otherwise it would be a huge financial burden for the government. So what we need to do is from each institution, each mandated organization, we have to have subcommittees. Finally, we combine these to produce a national infrastructure. Disaster management and environmental control are important because this is the area where GIS data are used heavily. And also we need to use spatial data for these areas. And large wealth of data we have on these areas, which belongs to different departments. And then funding is available from international agencies. So it's a matter of getting together, organize ourselves to produce what is required for the country. So we need to have a public committee and then subcommittees to carry out the task and then finally collect the information from various committees, combine and share. That will produce the NA. And also the human resource capabilities need to be developed and we have the funds available for that. Right. With that, we conclude the lecture for today and I give you the assignment. We need to develop individually. Each one of you need to develop proposal for Sri Lanka SDI. Proposal for Sri Lanka SDI. That proposal should have an introduction. It should be like a proper proposal, right? Which you can submit to the ministry, which can submit to the presidential secretariat to implement. So it should be a proper proposal with the introduction and then spatial data context, historical up to now, how we have evolved through the data, how historical development took place and what is the present status from the history we had to bring it down. And constraints that are delaying or preventing the SLSDI, what are the problems, issues, constraints we have. And then we have to identify institutional setup for setting up SLSDI. What are the key pillars, key organizations which will shoulder the weight of this SLSDI? And then who are the other agencies who can support this? And institutional, after institutional setup, you look at considerations for SLSDI. What are the things that you need to consider? Because that should be unique based on our society. What kind of data sharing, what kind of data ownership, what kind of data value addition, what kind of data copyright, what kind of data accuracies. All these things can be defined. So we need to have considerations for SLSDI. And then new initiatives required for SLSDI. If it doesn't work with the current setup, what are the new initiatives required to launch a proper SLSDI? And then you need to write conclusions and recommendations and include the references. So your proposal should be somewhere in the range of 10 to 18, 19 pages. And you need to submit this. You have time until June 9th. Submit electronically to gs5101@yahoo.com. And the subject column, put SLSDI. And the subject column, put SLSDI together so that it will be directed to correct folder. Otherwise, your submission would be lost. So put under subject SLSDI. You don't need to put your index number or anything under subject column that you can put inside the report, inside the proposal, but just mail it with gs5101@yahoo.com, put the subject SLSDI and your proposal. You can use internet resources, but don't use ChatGPT because it will not have proper the background knowledge to produce such a information, because you are equipped, you have been following this course. So since you have been following this course, you have sufficient knowledge to sort out things which are required for SDA. So therefore, you cannot really produce a report from the chat GPT or any other similar platform. So you need to search in internet resources and then produce this report, this proposal. Any questions that you want to ask? Read this and I'll give you 5 minutes. If you have any questions, you can ask. So I will, what I'll do is I'll copy this thing and then I'll copy it to the chat. So that you will see the major topics that you want to cover. So if you don't have any questions, we'll wind up the session. And I'll expect this final assignment to be handed over by the deadline. And then I'll submit the marks and will share with you how you have progressed in the course. Okay. Right. And those who are following the spatial statistics course, we'll resume the course from where we stopped from next week. Okay. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Recording stop.